Yes. So if you had any sort of money in this time, and you were a politician in New York, and you just happened to pass through Kinderhook on your way to Albany, or possibly going to New York City, maybe you would have stopped here and had a nice dinner with Martin Van Buren in this room. Originally, when the house was built, this room would have been 2 rooms. You would have walked in through the front door, been met with kind of a foyer area where a servant would have taken your coat, you would have wiped off your shoes, and then you would have headed upstairs to the party area through a U-shaped staircase. When Martin Van Buren purchased this house in 1839, he didn't really like that setup. He wanted more of a social, political space in this area here. He knocked down that wall, took the staircase out, and made this room into the main dining area. When he did this, he added the wallpaper that you see on the walls here. The 2 long walls are the original wallpaper from Martin Van Buren. The 2 short walls, has been added by the Park Service. Unfortunately, when the Park Service bought this house in 1973, the conservators who were hired to redo this wallpaper could not save the 2 short walls. So what we have here is the 2 original long walls. You can see the original wallpaper that Martin Van Buren enjoyed, and then the 2 short walls, you can see exactly how he enjoyed it at that time. So I said that this space was mainly for social and political gatherings, and he needed a room large enough to have a lot of people in this room. As you can see, we're a group of 12, including me, 13 people, and we're still pretty comfortable in this room, at least in the section that you guys are in. This table is about 20 feet long, and it holds about 21 people comfortably. If you wanted to have a dance or any sort of gathering that did not include dinner or any kind of a meal, the servants would have taken all the leaves out of this table, and they would have folded it up, and it would have become 21 inches. After it was folded up, they would have pushed it out of the way, and you would have been able to have this entire room to do your dancing, to do your socializing, to talk to people one-on-one, or maybe you could have addressed the entire room. Also, this table is convenient not only for the social aspect of it for political life, but it's also convenient because Martin Van Buren had 4 surviving sons, 3 of them got married, and all 3 of them who got married had children. So you would have had to have enough space for not only the adults to sit here comfortably, but for all of the children to have a nice space to eat. So that's what this table in this room is for. Next to you here on this wall, we have a guest bedroom. I invite you to look at that and then meet me at the other end of the hall. So what everyone is looking at is called the best bedroom. It would have been a guest room. The most famous guest that stayed at this house was Henry Clay. He was the senator from Kentucky. Henry Clay was supposed to stay only 1 night, and in fact ended up staying 3 nights to discuss something that we'll talk about a little bit later. The next room that you're going to look at, that is right in front of me, is the green room. Aptly named because everything in that room is green, or at least has a green tone to it. That room would have been either the ladies' parlor or it would have been the family parlor. The ladies' parlor, it would have been on a night that there would have been a political gathering here. Obviously, you couldn't go alone to these political functions, you would have to bring your wife. So whoever was a woman in that day would have gone to this room to maybe talk about the style of the time, maybe talk about the neighbors, play some music, and just relax after the evening. It would have also been the room that the family would have retired to on a night that not all of the political people were here. Martin Van Buren, like I said, did have a rather large family, and one of the most famous things that we like to think of about Martin Van Buren is he was a rather good grandfather. So he would have come to that room after dinner, played with his grandchildren, read, listened to them tell their stories, maybe played a game or 2 with them in that room. He also hung a painting above the fireplace, and that is John Van Buren. That is Martin Van Buren's 2nd oldest son, and he will eternally be looking at his father right across the hall. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Who knows? I don't know. Does anybody have any questions before we move on?
So what is depicted in this wall?
It is called The Landscape of a Hunt. It depicts 7 hunting scenes in the Alsace-Lorraine region of France. The Alsace-Lorraine region is mostly known for its importance in World War II, Germany wanting that land to be theirs and the French claiming it as theirs.
So it's like a Prussian.
Yep. Yep.
But was there any relationship to him?
Marc Van Buren was a big fan of all things French.
Okay.
What you'll see throughout the house, if I've been told, I've never been there, that this house reminds a lot of people of Monticello, Jefferson's house. All of the politicians at that point, I'm not really sure why, but they had a real affinity towards all things French. The first is obviously this wallpaper. As you'll see on the fireplaces, there's a lot of boards. That is a French custom. The ones that we have in this house are original to the house. If there is a fireplace without a French board over it, it is because there wasn't one for that room.
Was this continuously lived in until?
Yes. Yep. Until 1973. Yep. In 1862, Martin Van Buren passed away. 2 years later, one of his sons, John, who's in that painting, sold the house, and then it was in private hands until 1973 when the Park Service bought it. Actually, from one of the women who is walking around here on another tour.
This is
Wow.
beautifully preserved.
Yes.
Oh, so the original owner is.
Touring the house right now. Yes.
Wow.
Yes. I was trying to get a chance to talk to her, unfortunately. You know, we all have our responsibilities here,
But it wasn't furnished like this.
most of the furnishings in this house were found in this house. Thankfully, most of the people who lived here kind of had an affinity for hoarding everything. So a lot of the stuff, including this bed here, is original to the house.
Amazing.
We actually know from documented diaries from Angelica Singleton Van Buren, who I will talk about later. She was the first lady. She had a miscarriage and spent a lot of her time on that bed in this hall following that miscarriage. Any questions? All right, we're going to move on to the men's parlor.
Oh, wow.
I just closed those doors. Normally I keep them open so you can kind of peer into the next room. Unfortunately, we've just run into the second tour that's going through the house right now. That doesn't typically happen. Our tours usually are only running for an hour. So if we bump into them, I apologize. So what we're in now is the formal parlor or the gentleman's parlor. This would have been the room where, after a political party, Martin Van Buren and the gentlemen would have come to smoke a cigar, talk shop, and possibly talk about the women that were across the hall. They also would have talked about the gentlemen that are on the walls. I'm going to quiz you because I brought my boyfriend through this house recently, and he couldn't tell me who that guy was.
Jackson.
Jackson. Who's this guy?
Thomas Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson. And who's that guy over there?
Mars
There you go. Okay. So we have 3 men on these walls. We have Martin Van Buren above the fireplace in the most prominent position in this room on the wall. And then next to him we have Thomas Jefferson. And then next to him is Andrew Jackson. These men are on the walls for a couple reasons. The first being when Martin Van Buren wrote to each of these gentlemen, he wrote, "I have your likeness hanging on my walls." He took a copy, he had a reproduction of the original presidential painting for both Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson. So we have copies of Martin Van Buren's copies. Follow that logic. They're also on the walls for a couple other reasons. Martin Van Buren followed closely both of Jefferson and Jackson's politics very closely. Early on in Van Buren's career, he campaigned for Thomas Jefferson, and then he followed Jefferson's politics. Andrew Jackson, I said before that he was Andrew Jackson's vice president. He was supposed to be administered in England. However, thanks to John Calhoun and his craziness, he was not elected to that position. He was then allowed to run with Andrew Jackson and serve under Andrew Jackson as his vice president. And then after Andrew Jackson has served his 2 terms, Andrew Jackson supported Martin Van Buren for his presidential bid for president. Van Buren won. He was the 8th president of the United States, the first U.S. citizen to serve as president, and the first and only president so far to have English as his second language. Following this, Wow, I'm talking an awful lot today. In addition to this, Jefferson and Jackson were very influential in Martin Van Buren's politics. All three men favored Western expansion. In 1803, Jefferson obviously made the $15 million purchase of Louisiana, expanding the United States to about double its size. Andrew Jackson, and then following him, Martin Van Buren, favored Western expansion. However, all three of these men did not favor a federal bank. This led in 1837, 36 days into Martin Van Buren's presidency, to have the bank panic of 1837, which lasted about 6 years. Blamed on Martin Van Buren, however, having its roots with Andrew Jackson's presidency, which most people like to point out to me that it is happening now. I'm not so sure about that. You guys can make your own decisions. I will not take a political stand on that at any point during this time. Also, when I think about Andrew Jackson, I think about something else, and that is the Trail of Tears. Andrew Jackson is conveniently pictured next to some Rocky Mountain Indians. They are not the same Native Americans that were forced off their land. However, I think it's very ironic that Andrew Jackson in 1830 passed the Indian Removal Act, and he's pictured next to some Native Americans. However, it wasn't until 1836 that this act is enacted, and Martin Van Buren ultimately gets claimed for the Trail of Tears. At this point, nothing really could have been done by Van Buren. However, it's more controversial more recently than it was in Van Buren's time to be blamed for the Trail of Tears. Okay, so that's an awful lot to be thrown at you. Is there any questions? All right, we're